you understand why I am like I am, I tell you about my grandfather. My grandfather was born in Friedenthal, Russia, or Prussia. So he was a great German. His father was called as an architect to come over to Russia. He was given special privileges that Russians didn't have. So my grandfather was raised as a special person. He studied Spanish, French, Latin, German, Russian, and Old Slavic languages. So he was an educated man, and he was afraid he was going to get conscripted into the army, and he liked, sound of the United States. So he immigrated to America in 1892. He didn't speak any English, and all he could speak was German good, so he bought a German book and he bought an English book. And between the two, he translated to the people where he wanted to go. And his wife wanted to go someplace that was warm because the only time her feet were warm was in the summer. So they sent them, the immigration officer sent them down to Temple, Texas. And in Temple, Texas, he was a farmer, a cotton farmer. Now, he had no knowledge of cotton at all, but they stayed there for 12 years. His wife went to work for a family. Now, mind you, they had 2 children when they came over. And so after 10 years, they moved up to North Dakota, and they homesteaded 120 acres, and he stayed in farming. His wife died at the birth of their 11th child in 1904. The newborn was adopted out, and the next child, a girl, he didn't want that to be adopted, but he did give it to a family to raise, and he kept in touch with it. He kept in touch with all his children. And he contacted some of his friends in Temple, Texas, where they lived, and asked if they knew of a nice Mennonite girl that he could marry to take care of his children. So they told him to go to Lehigh, Kansas, that there was a lady there that he thought would fill the bill. She was a seamstress and wanted to be a missionary. And her friend said, but she could never make up her mind to go. So her friends told her, well, that would be a missionary effort for her if she would go and take care of Grandpa's 11 children. Now it would be only 10 or 9, I guess. Anyway, she went up there, and it was not a good marriage because she beat all the kids. They had a farm, and the kids all worked in this field. And then at lunchtime they came in. The boys got to rest, but the girls had to go in and get the lunch ready and fix it. And then they went back on the field, so they never got any time off to rest up. Then that's my grandfather on my mother's side. My grandfather on my father's side also came from Prussia, and he moved here in the fall of 1882. And when North Dakota celebrated the centennial in 1983, this became a centennial farm. Eventually, Grandpa Luke became ill, and he divided the farm up between 3 of his sons, and he moved to Jamestown, North Dakota, and built a house. And so the 3 sons, my father, Clinton, and Elmer, and Art, all in the same area, continued on the farm. And Elmer's son continued to farm the farm, and that's why it became a centennial farm, because it still belonged in the family. And now they retired, and his son Jack farms all of that. He must farm. He rents farms from other people and works, and he must work thousands of acres of land. I'm amazed. Anyway, it's a good farming area. When we were on the farm, I was on the farm until I was 6 years old. And I had a brother who was 19 months older than I was, and he was a little pyromaniac. My folks would go down the barn and milk the cows, and my brother would come and wake me up, get the matches, and off into the field we'd go and light the haystacks. And when that wasn't fun anymore, we'd walk over half a mile or a quarter mile to Uncle Elmer's house and play with the cousins. And then of course, Mother was a good spanker, so we got spanked, I think, almost every day. Well, let's see, besides, the last thing we did is we lit you know what a manure pile is? It's where you take the manure from the barn and you pile it outside. Well, we had a big manure pile outside, and we lit that one day and almost burnt the barn down. That was the end. Then we also had we did some trapping. If you caught a gopher, you'd get a nickel a tail. So we set some traps out in the grove, and one day the trap was full. So my brother said, "Now Helen, you get in front and pull, and I'll stand in back and hit the skunk." Well, hit the gopher. And it turned out to be a skunk. And when he came out of that hole, he turned around and let her go. And I thought I was going to be blind. They took all my clothes and burned them, and I think they washed me in tomato juice. And we'd go in to visit Grandma, and she'd say, "Take that kid outside." It lasts a long time. Anyway, those are the things that I remember from being on the farm. We went to a one-room schoolhouse for 8th grade, all 8th grades, and we walked. It was, I estimate, between a half mile and 3/4 of a mile from the house. And the reason we moved away from the farm is my father got hurt. He was cleaning the binder, which we cut the grain with, in front of it one day, and the horses got scared and pulled forward and ran over him and put a sickle mark in his leg. And the second time he was slopping the pigs. He had a big pail of slop in each hand, and the pig ran between his legs, and he fell down and broke his hip. And they took him to Jamestown, and Jamestown Hospital and doctors decided that he should go to Fargo because they couldn't take care of him. Well, the end result was he ended up with a 3-inch short leg. So we sold the farm and moved to Nortonville, North Dakota, which is about 18 miles south of Jamestown. Before we were north of Jamestown. And we bought a grocery store. My mother played, you know what the futures market is in grains? She would buy, I don't know what kind of grain, wheat or barley or whatever the weather says that we were going to be short of, she'd buy. And we'd go to Jamestown, and we had to sit in the car while she was in dickering for a new car. We never did get that new car, but just about the time we had the money to buy it, she'd lose it. So that was kind of a routine on the weekends. We always went in on the weekends to visit Grandma. And you know, in those days, everything was closed on Sundays. And on the way home, we'd stop at the creamery and buy a pint of ice cream for everybody, and we'd sit there in the car and eat our ice cream and enjoy it. That was a treat for us. In Nortonville, we had a 4-room consolidated school, 12 grades, 3 gates per room. The elementary were downstairs, and high school and other grades were upstairs. And when we moved to Nortonville, for some reason or other, my mother thought I was dumb, I guess, and she made me repeat 1st grade. So I went to 1st grade again, and I had a little trouble in school. You know, we had a grocery store, and I could have everything I wanted, so I used to chew a lot of gum. And the teacher would look at me and say, "Helen, say after school, and you write 200 times on the blackboard, I'm not going to chew gum in school." That I remember was one of the most trouble I ever got in school. And then, of course, cigarettes were a tantalizing thing, so I used to swipe the cigarettes, and then us girls would go out into some place where there was a straw stack, and we'd sit down there and smoke our cigarettes and pretend we were movie stars. I had a good imagination. We also had a big gravel pit at the end of the town, and we'd go out there and we'd play cowboys and Indians. And then also we had a creek. It wasn't very wide. And I don't know why my mother never worried, but we went swimming. I didn't know how to swim, but I learned. And we swam downstream and the cows swam upstream. And the farmer that owned the land, he was very good to us. He allowed us all to come down and swim. And that was our summer activity. Anyway, in the wintertime, the people used to come into town on a sleigh, and we'd get our sleds and we'd go a little way out of town, and then we'd hook a ride on the back of the sleigh and come in town like that. That was fun. Let's see, about 1929, I think it was, the banks closed. We got the Depression. So the banks closed with our money. And of course, being a grocery store, you know, you always gave credit to the farmers until they harvested and then they paid you. So of course, we had all this farm credit, which was probably never paid. And we finally managed to sell the store, and we moved to Minneapolis. In Minneapolis, we bought a grocery store next to a junior high school. And the kids used to come over there and buy hot dogs and junk food, I'm sure. And that's the work we did there. And I remember one time we went on vacation and we left my brother in charge of the school. So he must have been a real responsible person. He wasn't a pyromaniac, I guess, anymore. My folks separated, and my mother, being in the market, met a gentleman who was a broker, I suppose, in the market. And they got married and we moved in. His wife had been gone for a long time, so his two children, a girl and a boy, the girl was in high school, and the boy was about my age, I think, maybe a year older. And we two kids lived in one bedroom, and I'm with my mother until the oldest girl left home, graduated from high school, and then we each had a bedroom. So that's, and then during the summers, I used to babysit. I'd walk about over a mile down to this lady's house, and I'd babysit and then walk back. And that was when I was in, I think, 9th grade. In 10th grade, I worked for a lawyer's family, and the lady asked me if I'd iron his sheets, and I think he wore 2 white shirts a day. And I got, I think, $1 raise in pay. I got $4 a week in board and room. Then when my folks moved to Benson, Minnesota, this was for my high school 12th grade. She left me in town, and I was a clerk in a grocery store, and I stayed with the female clerk from there. And my mother said it just broke her heart to leave me alone in town with that lady. But anyway, I worked there all summer in the grocery store, and then moved to Benson for my senior year in school. Following my graduation from Benson, Minnesota, I went to the University of Minnesota. And before my folks moved to Benson, my mother went to Booty School. Now, she was about 37 years old or so, I think, then. And she went to Booty School, and my stepfather owned a great big building, and that's why we moved out to Benson. And she had a dress shop and a beauty shop, and we lived upstairs. And I think there were some apartments up there that were rented. And my mother used to tell us the farmers would come in, they'd bring their wife, and they'd say, how much money do you need? And they would give my mother the money that her beauty shop bill would be. Never gave any money to the wife. They couldn't handle it. And that was a kind of an interesting. Going to school, by the way, in a rural community was new to us. Because there, when you went to see the basketball game or the football game, you had to travel 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 miles to the next town where the contest would be held. So we did a lot of traveling during the sports time. I had a farm boy for a friend, but I didn't want to be a farmer's wife. I wanted to be a dancer, but I didn't have good enough looking legs to do that. And my mother, from the day I was born and the day my brother was born, she designated I would be a nurse and he would be a doctor. And that's the way it was. So we went off to college and I studied to be a nurse. My brother studied to be a doctor, and he worked for a chemical company for 25 cents an hour to help pay for his schooling. And he became a pediatrician. And I got my RN in education and a certificate in public health. I couldn't make up my mind which one I wanted to do. Following graduation from nursing school, incidentally, back in those days, the nursing program was a 5-year program. 2 years of college and 2.5 years, well, I suppose, and then summers. So we had enough time in the nursing, and then we had 1 more year on the campus for theory. So it took us 5 years to graduate. And my brother was in Detroit, Michigan as an intern. And I had 2 girlfriends that went to Detroit, and they were in public health. So I followed them to Detroit and worked at Grace Hospital, and I was a clinical instructor. In other words, I followed the students around and supervised their activities while they were there. And I met another clinical supervisor who was from New York. And we were both unhappy with the quality of care at this hospital. So we decided we didn't want to ruin our career, so we would resign and join the Army. So we resigned the school in July and went to the Army, and they sent us to Savannah, Georgia for our beginning. It was to an Army hospital. Oh, while I was in nursing school, the first 2 years I worked at the General Hospital as a clerk for my boarding room. And my job was to go around the nursing unit and count all the different kinds of diet that the patients were on, so that they could order the trays. And I think there were 25 people in the ward, and then we had about 2 or 3 private rooms.